And also, I think knowing your triggers, knowing your child's triggers, your client's triggers, and being thoughtful and mindful of the way that you're communicating with them about those triggers. If they're, throwing a fit because they don't want to go into the school because they don't feel safe, or they, whatever the reason is why they maybe don't want to transition into the school, instead of just, it's time to go, let's go, we're late, our teacher's going to get mad, let's go, come on. Just kind of rushing them through it, just take a second and empathize with them. Like, I see that you're really upset. I have struggled with this too when I was your age. And just take that moment to connect with them and validate their feelings before moving on to, what's the plan? How are we going to get into school? What can I help you with? Just be with them. And it's scary to feel that way, to go into a school or whatever the situation is that they're feeling anxious about. I'm Rachel.
And I'm Jessica. And this is All Things Sensory by Harkla.
We are both certified occupational therapy assistants, and together with Harkla, we are on a mission to empower parents, therapists, and educators to help raise confident and strong children of all abilities.
On this podcast, we chat about all things sensory, diving into special needs, occupational therapy, parenting, self-care, overall health and wellness, and so much more.
We are here to provide raw, honest, and fun strategies, ideas, and information for parents, therapists, and educators, as well as other professionals to implement into daily life.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey there, welcome back to All Things Sensory by Harkla. We're happy to have you here for another podcast. I'm Rachel.
I'm Jessica. We are going to talk about the connection between sensory over-responsivity and anxiety.
This is a topic I am very passionate about.
Of course.
It's a great topic.
It's unique. It's exciting.
I don't know why. I just think it's so fascinating to see no one knows about the connection between sensory sensitivity, hypersensitivity, a highly sensitive person, and anxiety.
Well, they're going to today.
They're going to know. But I feel like online, everyone is like, highly sensitive, I'm highly sensitive. I just feel like that's the buzzword right now.
It is. It's very popular.
Very popular, which is great. I'm glad that this is a topic that's getting out there, but I really wanted to dive deeper into what sensory over-responsivity really is and the connection to anxiety.
Because anxiety is very popular right now as well.
Do you have anxiety, or do you have sensory over-responsivity, or what
Both.
came first, the chicken or the egg? Mm-hmm. Is one causing the other? And so I think that we should just dive in.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about what is sensory over-responsivity. Mm-hmm. We're going to talk about some research articles, and then we're going to give you 3 tips to support either yourself or your clients or your children, whoever you know needs some help. We're going to give you some tips.
Exactly.
But first, what it is.
Sensory over-responsivity is a subtype of sensory processing disorder. I feel like a subtype. My S's are just all
gosh. Well, it's a subtype of a subtype of a subtype of a subtype.
Exactly.
It's not actually that many.
No, but it feels like it is. So it's a person who is overly sensitive or over-responsive to a certain type of sensory input. Mm-hmm. And it can impact them in a variety of ways. I feel like we should go over some examples. That's how we're really going to get your buy-in here of like, oh, I noticed this in myself, or oh, I noticed this in my child.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So an example of vestibular over-responsivity is going to be somebody who gets motion sickness all the time, mm-hmm. who avoids certain types of movement because it makes them dizzy, mm-hmm. a child who does not like activities where their feet leave the ground. We often call that gravitational insecurity, which is also a part of sensory over-responsivity as it relates to the vestibular system.
Mm-hmm. And then auditory overstimulation is when noises are too much for you, competing background noises are too much. Often we'll see children covering their ears when the toilet flushes, or they will completely refuse to blow dry their hands with the air blow dryers, and they'll have a really big reaction to those loud noises. Blenders, sirens.
Did you say vacuums?
Vacuums, fire alarms. Yeah. All the classic loud noises in our environment.
Someone who is over-responsive to visual input is going to be very distracted when other people walk by. They are going to struggle to focus on what they need to focus on if there's movement around them. They're going to struggle with reading and writing tasks because if they look at a page of text, they're going to be just visually overstimulated by how much is there, and it's too much for their brain to process. The other thing I was going to say is that when somebody is over-responsive to a certain type of sensory input, they're going to get what we call sensory overload or sensory overstimulation, and it causes adverse responses. I don't remember if we said that already.
Not specifically. We probably will get to it, and we'll talk about it some more. I did want to add one more thing to your visual. When you are at the grocery store, I always think of this in the soup can aisle because there's like so many different cans of soup. I don't know why this is my example.
Yeah, why all the aisles?
I know, but it's like they all look the same. And so you're looking for like one specific type of soup.
What type of soup are you looking for?
Bean with bacon? I don't know. Campbell's bean with bacon. That's the first thing that came to my mind. I don't eat it. I used to eat it, but I don't eat it anymore. That's no shade if you like bean with bacon soup. It wrecks my internal area. I only know this because my mom loves bean with bacon soup, and the last time she was here, she got it. She's like, oh, maybe the kids will like it. And I had some, and I like couldn't even stand up for 3 days. My stomach hurt so bad.
It's terrible.
I know. So anyways, you're in the can of soup aisle and you're like, wow, I need the bean with bacon soup, but I can't visually discriminate between all of the soup cans to find that one specific kind of soup.
Because there's too many.
There's too much competing visual input. Same with the junk drawer. You're trying to find the quarter in the junk drawer, the Sharpie in the junk drawer, and it's a junk drawer. So there's shit everywhere.
Junk everywhere. Yeah.
Sorry. But anyways, that's the visual overload. Yeah. And you just shut down. It's too much. So you just walk away without the bean with bacon soup.
Thank goodness. The next one is signs of tactile over-responsivity. So we often see this in children and adults who can't tolerate certain types of clothing textures, can't tolerate the tags on their shirts. Maybe they wear their shirt inside out on purpose. Wasn't going to name any names. This could also be an extreme picky eater because we have tactile receptors in our mouth. So when the tactile system can't tolerate certain textures, this can lead to extreme picky eating where the child or the adult can't eat certain foods because their tactile system is so over-responsive that they can't process it and it causes an adverse response.
Mm-hmm. And then olfactory over-responsivity is your sense of smell. And a good example is if you or your child walk into a public bathroom and it's really stinky and you immediately, or maybe your child immediately throws up.
Or maybe it's not even really stinky to you.
But to them it is.
Yes.
Yeah, and they refuse to go in the bathrooms because it's so stinky. Like, it's one thing to say, oh yeah, this is stinky, and still be able to go in, do your business, and leave. But for someone who is like, no, it's too stinky, I will hold it until I pee my pants, that is a problem. Mm-hmm. That's when we know that it's impacting their ability to get through their day.
Yep. For gustatory, this is your sense of taste. This could be somebody who can't tolerate certain tastes or textures of food. Goes along with our tactile over-responsivity as well. When we're talking about challenges with feeding and can't tolerate certain types of food, we do want to look for like feeding and swallowing difficulties as well. Mm-hmm. But from a sensory standpoint, it could be a sign of over-responsivity.
Yep. And then also for our interoceptive system, we might feel too much. We might feel too much pain. We might feel too hot or too cold. We might have to go to the bathroom and we feel like it's an emergency every time. We just are a little bit more, I don't want to say
sensitive,
aware, but like you are very aware, like, oh, you ate one bite too much of dinner tonight and you feel like you're going to throw up. So it's just a little bit more sensitive to what's happening internally in around you, on you.
But that also goes along with our emotions.
Yep.
Because our interoceptive system is responsible for our emotions and our feelings, how our body feels during certain situations, which leads us to talk about anxiety, which is a feeling or an emotion you might feel in certain situations. But if you have high anxiety, if you are always in fight or flight, you get upset very easily, and it's like chronic. It's not just every once in a while, but it's all the time. Could that be a sign that you have sensory over-responsiveness to sensory input? So there's our connection.
There's the connection, yes. And I just feel like for someone who maybe is in, what's the word? Like a loop? Is it a loop? Is that the word that I'm thinking of?
Finish your sentence and we'll tell you.
Where it's like we're going to a concert and we know it's going to be too loud. And so we bring headphones, but we just get anxious because we know we're going to go to a concert, but we know it's going to be too loud and there's going to be a lot of people there. And that also stresses us out.
Oh, so it's like the feedback loop.
It's like a loop. Okay. So it was a loop.
So a feedback loop. Yeah, sure. Oh my God.
So it's a loop, right?
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the right term.
I don't know, but it's like,
someone will tell us. They'll comment and tell us.
What, are we anxious because we are going to the concert? We know it's going to be loud. We're sensitive to loud noises. Or are we feeling anxious because we're going to the concert and there's going to be loud noises or loud, I don't know. You know what I'm saying? Kind of.
Well, you just said the same thing. So
I know, but I was trying to do the opposite thing. It just didn't work right.
I don't know what point you're trying to make right now.
I'm trying to, you're just staring at me like,
I don't know.
Okay, get it together,
I don't
Rachel.
know.
I'm trying to make the point, or not make the point. I'm trying to identify what came first. The sensory over-responsivity.
Or the
anxiety. Specifically in this situation to loud noises.
Gotcha. Well, I think in that specific situation, you've experienced it before, right?
Yeah.
You've been to a concert. It was very loud. It was very overstimulating. So now you're going to go to another one and you know that it's going to be loud again. So your brain remembers that and starts to flood your body with those stress chemicals in anticipation of becoming over-responsive because it's so loud.
Yeah.
It is a feedback loop. I think you're right.
Sure. Just couldn't get my words out.
Someone will let us know if we're right or not.
Great. Well, yeah. Okay, that leads us into the research articles that we're going to share about. And this first article is called Sensory Over-Responsivity, an Early Risk Factor for Anxiety and Behavioral Challenges in Young Children. And so this specific article had two goals: to examine whether sensory over-responsivity is predictive of the development of anxiety in a large prospective sample of children. And the second goal was to identify whether anxiety mediates the relationship between sensory over-responsivity and behavioral challenges.
So kind of the same question that you asked.
Yes.
Like which came first?
Yes.
Sensory over-responsivity or anxiety?
Yes.
Well, let's see what they said.
So the parents reported on the behavioral challenges previously found to be associated with both the sensory over-responsivity and the anxiety separately. Things like irritability, food selectivity or sensitivity, sleep problems, and GI issues.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that because of the bean with bacon soup. Anyways.
That's a separate situation.
It's a whole nother can of worms. Or can of bean with bacon soup.
Oh my God.
I'm sorry. If I say that one more time, I'm going to lose my mind.
I am going to the store today, so I'm going to look for that that soup in the soup aisle.
Okay, great.
Will it be in the organic section?
No.
Okay.
Definitely not not that section. Okay, anyways, 43% of preschool children with sensory over-responsivity also had concurrent impairing anxiety disorder.
I think that's important to notice that verbiage, that it's impairing anxiety disorder to the point where their anxiety in preschool children, the anxiety impaired their ability to do things
successfully and independently. So that's 43%. Preschool sensory over-responsivity symptoms significantly and positively predicted anxiety symptoms at age 6. So these 43% of kids, it's predicting them to have anxiety symptoms at age 6. The relationship was both specific and unidirectional. And finally, the school-aged anxiety symptoms mediated the relationship between preschool sensory over-responsivity symptoms and both irritability and sleep problems at the school-aged level. So the results suggest that sensory over-responsivity is a risk factor for anxiety disorders. So there's the chicken or the egg, whichever one came first.
Yeah.
The results suggested sensory over-responsivity is a risk factor for anxiety disorders. So the last part, the conclusion, children who have symptoms of sensory over-responsivity as preschoolers have higher levels of anxiety symptoms, not anxiety diagnosed, when they're at school aged. So kindergarten and up, which in turn is associated with increased levels of school-aged behavioral challenges.
Which I think that makes sense.
I do too.
Because if you look at a baby, baby's not going to have anxiety, right? Their brain hasn't developed enough to have those thought processes.
Correct.
However, their sensory system has developed enough to have over-responsivity. And for that baby to be sensory over-responsive to any number of our any number of activities in our senses. So to me, that makes sense.
Yeah. You can almost see this in infants as well, like you mentioned. You can see the colic, you can see the hypersensitivity to what they're wearing, and you throw them in the air and they freeze and they get uncomfortable. And so you can see a lot of those symptoms, whether or not they progress or remediate is kind of up to the caregivers, early intervention,
the environment,
assessing it, even recognizing it.
Yeah, well, yeah.
So that's the first article.
All right, the second article is titled Relationships Among Sensory Responsiveness, Anxiety, and Ritual Behaviors in Children with and Without Atypical Sensory Responsiveness. Wow, responsiveness.
You've got this.
Words are so hard. Okay. So the goal of this article was to explore relationships between sensory responsiveness, anxiety, and ritual behaviors in boys with typical and atypical sensory responsiveness. So 48 boys ages 5 to 9 participated in the study. 28 of them had atypical sensory responsiveness and 20 did not. Atypical sensory responsiveness was defined as a score of, they used a sensory profile. Okay. I feel like if people really want to dig into the details of this, they can look at that.
Yeah, we don't have to break all of that down.
The parents completed the sensory profile, the screen for child anxiety-related emotional disorders, and the childhood routines inventory. And the results were that children with atypical sensory responsiveness had significantly higher levels of anxiety and a higher frequency of ritual behaviors than the controls. So the ritual behaviors are going to be things like almost like OCD or autistic type of behaviors.
Kind of repetitive behaviors, things that they participated in consistently.
Atypical sensory responsiveness was significantly related to both anxiety and ritual behaviors, with anxiety mediating the relationship between sensory modulation and ritual behaviors. The findings allude to the potential consequences of atypical sensory responsiveness and could support the notion that ritual behaviors develop as a coping mechanism in response to anxiety stemming from primary difficulty in modulating sensory input. That also makes sense. A ritual behavior of controlling a situation, repeating things, is a way to control something that you can control when your anxiety makes you feel like you don't have control.
Yeah, and I just feel like the more research I'm diving into and the more courses I'm taking about sensory processing and whatnot, the kids who are over-responsive are the ones who want control over every situation. They're the ones whose parents are walking on eggshells around them not to tip them over the edge. You know, they put the correct clothes out, the socks without the seams. The breakfast is made with 2 eggs, 2 slices of bacon, 3 blueberries, not 4, because that'll set them off. You know, kind of just, I don't want to say feeding into it, but if they don't, then it's meltdown central. And as parents, you know, we don't want our children to be losing their minds every minute of the day. And so, like this article talks about the connection between having that control, those ritual behaviors, the anxiety, the sensory over-responsivity.
Yeah, it's all
So
connected and it makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now that we have broken down SOR, sensory over-responsivity, anxiety, if you are like, check, 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 this is what I'm noticing, this is my child, this is me to a T, here are some tips that you can implement, you can add to your routine, you can help your clients. Here's what you can do.
The first one is to address sensory processing, address the sensory over-responsiveness. What are you, we'll say we're going to just generalize and talk about a child.
Yeah.
Right? But this could be you, your clients, whoever. What is the child over-responsive to? And create specific strategies for specific situations. So if the child is over-responsive to auditory input in specific situations, use noise canceling headphones. If they're visually over-responsive, can you dim the lights or let them wear sunglasses, right? So provide tools and strategies and environmental modifications for specific situations.
Yes. And then we're going to use specific sensory interventions. If you're a therapist, you're going to set up the environment for an activity that stimulates, you know, the chemistry in their brain to hit a certain level, so that way they can have an appropriate adaptive response, or they can work to having that appropriate adaptive response. And implementing sensory diets consistently throughout the day, making sure that we are using proprioceptive input, because it will be your best friend. It will organize the nervous system. It will calm the anxiety. Just having little tools like chewing gum, pushing your tongue to the roof of your mouth, doing jumping jacks,
A crunchy snack.
eating something crunchy, sucking on a lollipop or a hard candy.
Crawling.
I'm
surprised you didn't say it yet.
Well, I was going to, but
beat
you know.
to it.
Using those proprioceptive strategies throughout maybe an activity that is it's like kind of overloading you or overloading your client or your child, using that proprioceptive system to kind of reorganize the nervous system.
Going outside is a very, very grounding activity. Very grounding, very regulating. If you could be barefoot in the grass, in the dirt, go for a walk, get some natural sunlight. That is a great strategy.
Another strategy that's very overlooked, and you know, it's one of those simple ones, is just taking a deep breath. Because when we are anxious, we're usually breathing really shallow, and it's kind of sending us into fight or flight. And when we have anxiety, I mean, our body feels like there's a lion chasing after us at any minute.
Those
we need to be
chemicals are being released.
Ready to go.
Yep.
But when we take a deep breath and those lungs hit our ribs, it activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which says, oh, you're able to take a deep breath? Oh, that must mean that there's no lion chasing after you, so I don't need to be feeling this way, right? Of course, that's not going to just like, oh, ding, 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 your anxiety's gone. Like, that's not what it's going to do. But it will at least tell your brain, oh, you're safe. And, you know, even just like repeating that and teaching your clients to repeat that. I'm safe. I'm sitting in a room right now. There's no one trying to hurt me. My body's not trying to hurt me. And you kind of going through that positive self-talk of, I'm safe.
Sure. Yeah.
I'm here. We're good.
Yeah. If you're a parent and your child is anxious, they have sensory over-responsiveness, and it's negatively impacting their ability to get through their day, talk to your pediatrician and get a referral for OT services, and find a really good OT who specializes in sensory integration techniques and strategies. Working one-on-one with a really good professional is going to be a game changer.
Yeah, definitely more than what you can do independently at home. I feel like having someone on your team that you can talk to and you can ask them questions, and they can give you additional strategies specific to your child.
A therapist who has training in sensory integration is going to just blow your mind.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Yeah. It's the goal. Okay, number 2, look at primitive reflex integration. We know that there is a very distinct connection between Moro Reflex integration and anxiety. Often when the Moro Reflex is not integrated, or they're holding on to it, or you're holding on to it, it will trigger stress chemicals and stress hormones to be released, and it will kind of send you into this state of chronic fight or flight. And a lot of people who do have anxiety also have a retained Moro Reflex.
Yep. So ideally you can find a professional who works on primitive reflex integration. A lot of occupational therapy providers do this. Chiropractors do this sometimes. I think finding a professional is the most difficult part. But you could get on Facebook and, find a group and reach out and find someone really good via word of mouth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely word of mouth is a great way. If you also are not able to find an in-person clinician, we do have a course that teaches you how to assess and screen and also integrate those primitive reflexes. If you aren't able to find a practitioner to help you and you want to get started, oftentimes practitioners have really long wait lists too. So if you're on a wait list and you're like, let's get started, let's jump in, we do have the course option as well.
Totally. Number 3, find ways to decompress on a daily basis. If you are over-responsive to sensory input and you have high anxiety, one of the things that you need to do is figure out a way to teach your body that it's safe and that it can feel calm. And for a child, this might look like going outside on a regular basis. This might look like a sensory corner in the house where they can go and it has, maybe it's a tent or a closet, so it decreases the visual stimulation, and they have tools in their sensory corner that they can use to this goes along with the tip number 1 of using sensory strategies, but they can use their sensory tools and strategies to just feel more calm and regulated. But it needs to be done on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Part of the daily routine.
And also, I think knowing your triggers, knowing your child's triggers, your client's triggers, and being thoughtful and mindful of the way that you're communicating with them about those triggers. If they're, throwing a fit because they don't want to go into the school because they don't feel safe, or they, whatever the reason is why they maybe don't want to transition into the school, instead of just, it's time to go, let's go, we're late, our teacher's going to get mad, let's go, come on. Just kind of rushing them through it, just take a second and empathize with them. I see that you're really upset. I have struggled with this too when I was your age. And just take that moment to connect with them and validate their feelings before moving on to, what's the plan? How are we going to get into school? What can I help you with? Just be with them. And it's scary to feel that way, to go into a school or whatever the situation is that they're feeling anxious about. But sit with it with them.
I just thought of another one, and that is to decrease screen time. I'm going to link a book in the description. It's called The Anxious Generation. I just finished reading it recently, and it's about how social media, pornography, video games have created a generation of anxiety, and creating all this anxiety in our teenagers, young adults, young school-age children. So I highly recommend reading that book and finding ways to get off the screen on a regular basis.
For adults and for children. This isn't just for, oh, hey, kids, don't be on screens. It's like us. Look at your own screen time management. How long are you on the screens?
And with that, we got to let you go because we've been on the screen for too long watching us.
We got to go take a brain break. We're going to go crawl. We're going to go take some deep breaths and organize our own nervous systems.
If this episode was helpful, make sure you share it with a friend. Make sure you subscribe, leave us a review, take a screenshot and share this on social media, and then get off the screen.
And then go play with your kids, put your phone down, and party on. Have a great night or day. What time is it today? I don't know.
Whenever you're listening.
We'll see you later.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to All Things Sensory by Harkla.
If you want more information on anything mentioned in the show, head over to harkla.co/podcast to get the show notes.
If you have any follow-up questions, the best place to ask those is in the comments on the show notes or message us on our Instagram account, which is at harkla_family or at All Things Sensory Podcast. If you just search Harkla, you'll find us there.
Like we mentioned before, our podcast listeners get 10% off their first order at Harkla. Whether it's for one of our digital courses or one of our sensory swings, the discount code SENSORY will get you 10% off. That's SENSORY.
Head to harkla.co/sensory to use that discount code right now.
We are so excited to work together to help create confident kids all over the world. While we make every effort to share correct information, we're still learning.
We will double check all of our facts, but realize that medicine is a constantly changing science and art.
One doctor or therapist may have a different way of doing things from another.
We are simply presenting our views and opinions on how to address common sensory challenges, health-related difficulties, and what we have found to be beneficial that will be as evidence-based as possible.
By listening to this podcast, you agree not to use this podcast as medical advice to treat any medical condition in either yourself or your child.
Consult your child's pediatrician or therapist for any medical issues that he or she may be having.
This entire disclaimer also applies to any guests or contributors to the podcast.
Thanks so much for listening.